You're listening to AudioMag, Magazines Canada's podcast. I'm Kylie Pohl, Manager of Member Services and Benefits at Magazines Canada, and I'm happy to share with you this special episode of AudioMag. This is part 2 of our 2-part series where we discuss how different elements of the magazine industry are responding and working through COVID-19 restrictions. Be sure to listen to part 1 where we discuss publishing, production, and retail sales with Melissa Summerfield, Jesse Johnson, and Michelle Gerard. Today, we hear from Jocelyn Bell, Julia Métraux, and James Anderson on their experiences working through COVID-19. We understand that this pandemic has brought unprecedented disruptions to the economy and daily life, and we hope to answer some of your needs with these short interviews. Our producer, Michael Brown, joins us once again as he introduces the interviews that he conducted. We are recording remotely. Please forgive any disruptions in audio quality. Hi, Michael, and thanks for joining us again. It's great to have you.
Hey, Kylie. Yeah, this is super fun, and we've got another great bunch of interviews for listeners.
Great. So to start things off, why don't you tell us about Jocelyn Bell?
Yeah, so Jocelyn is going to speak about kind of making editorial decisions right now. She's the editor and publisher of Broadview magazine, which people might recognize formerly as the United Church Observer. She's been in the role since 2018, and she's going to kind of give an overview of what it's like being in that position during COVID. And they actually... if you've already listened to part 1, when we talked with Jesse Johnston, their magazine Asparagus does not have an office, whereas Broadview does. And so that shift has kind of been interesting. And I think that there's a lot that people will find useful or at least very relatable working in the magazine industry here. So we'll throw to that now. And we're here now with Jocelyn Bell, editor and publisher of Broadview magazine, formerly the United Church Observer. Jocelyn, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
So if you could just provide our listeners a bit of an overview of Broadview and your role there and kind of the role of the magazine.
Sure. Well, I'm the editor and publisher, as you mentioned. I've been in that position since 2018. And before that, I was the managing editor. So my time with the magazine goes back to 2006. But a year ago, we decided to relaunch the United Church Observer as Broadview in an effort to reach an audience beyond just the United Church members. They remain our core and loyal readers, but we wanted to also be able to share our stories with more people in Canada. Broadview's editorial focus is faith, spirituality, ethical living, and social justice. And that's what we like to focus on.
Oh, that's great. So what has enabled Broadview to be so responsive to COVID-19 and the pieces that you've published?
Well, I think first and foremost, our staff, the editorial staff is made up of journalists. And so at our core, we're the kind of people who like to respond quickly as the news develops and be on top of things. So, I think, as the events unfolded with COVID-19, we quickly realized, we scrambled a bit, but we quickly realized that we needed to get that together. We weren't able to pull apart the issue that was about to come out because it was just too far along. We did switch out maybe 1 or 2 short pieces, but we didn't touch the feature well or the cover story. We did, however, take the next issue, and we were able to put together a really great cover package about churches during COVID and how they are responding and rallying together to respond to the challenges.
Yeah, that's great. That's, really keeping that focus on the content and the timeliness of COVID. So how do you decide which pieces that aren't related to COVID-19 to postpone and which to still publish?
Yeah, I mean, in print, our editorial mix is always made up of some newsier pieces and some evergreen pieces that, will be just as wonderful if you publish them now or in December. So it was the evergreen pieces that got bumped ahead to make space for COVID coverage. And, our writers understood that their pieces had to be postponed and to make way for to make room for the news. So, we just looked at what things we could move ahead and what stuff we needed to get in right away.
So How do you judge if you're doing enough COVID-19 coverage or if you're doing too much COVID coverage?
Well, online we track everything carefully. Um, this week, obviously, there's been a shift from COVID stories, away from COVID stories and towards stories about anti-Black racism and the protests that have followed. But there's still a strong appetite for COVID stories. We found that in May, 6 of our top 10 clicking stories were COVID related. Even in the past week, half of our top 10 stories were about COVID. So, when it's too much, people will stop clicking and we'll know. And print is a bit trickier, of course, because we do have some COVID stories planned for the fall. And it's hard to know right now if those stories will be hitting the right notes, whether we'll be back to normal or new normal.
Or second wave, perhaps, right?
Yeah, or maybe it's going to get worse. Nobody knows. So we plan things and then we have to adjust often, late into the production cycle. So, yeah.
So has there been a change in how you decide what content goes onto the website and what goes into the physical magazine? I know you kind of just touched on, will something that's planned for later in the year still be relevant? Website can be updated immediately versus the magazine, you're taking that longer view. So how do you respond to that?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it hasn't really changed. The newsy stuff has to go online quickly, and then the more evergreen pieces or the more reflective pieces, analytical, maybe go into print. So, one thing that we did change in terms of our strategy in the first month is that we moved one staff person who was normally on print over to digital because we were just producing a lot more content and the team needed help. So, that was one strategy that we employed there. We also looked at, we're not a hard news organization. People aren't coming to us to find out, what's the latest count of, positive COVID cases and things. So we decided that our special niche would be stories about faith communities across the faith spectrum, how they're responding and being affected, how particularly vulnerable populations were being affected, like the homeless, disabled, migrant workers, and also the people who were reaching out to them. And also just trying to find ways to connect our Broadview community so people didn't feel as isolated. So those are sort of some of the strategies that we try to, focus on in our coverage.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So how have you changed how you're commissioning and accepting pieces from writers?
It's not that different. I mean, at the start of 2020, we had earmarked some money for, maybe a special digital project. Maybe it would be a podcast or a video or something a little above and beyond. When COVID happened, we realized COVID is the special project. And so we increased the volume of our content, especially during the first month. So I think, probably, especially in the first few weeks, if writers were pitching stories that were not COVID related, they probably didn't get a green light from us, but we're mixing in a lot more different kinds of pieces now.
That's great. So what are some key lessons from working remotely that you're going to take with you as we kind of discover whatever this new normal is?
Yeah. One day I'm going to really savor a good old fashioned in-person meeting, where I don't have to watch myself talking on a Brady Bunch grid of faces. But on the other hand, I think I've learned that online meetings are really okay, and they can be an important way for us to save money and reduce our carbon footprint. So, we're looking at, we have some meetings that are pricier. For example, we have a board of directors of 11 people. They come from across Canada and they come 3 times a year. Well, maybe we've learned, we've had a few online board meetings now. Maybe we've learned that we can reduce that cost and that, carbon footprint.
Yeah. So would you, do you always work remotely, or is there an office space that Broadview has?
Yeah, we have an office. Yep. It's at the corner of Danforth and Broadview.
Oh, even funnier that then you're called Broadview. No, that's great. It's been interesting talking with some of the other publications where some have always been remote, so the change hasn't been that drastic in a lot of ways. But then, when it comes to reviewing or editing, they might have all gotten together at a point versus, when you're shifting fully from an office to fully remotely, that's an even bigger change.
Yeah, there's been a number of challenges, everything from, redirecting the mail to how do you get the checks signed and all those sorts of lots of problem solving, big and small. And the sad thing is we had just upgraded our meeting room. So we had, finally had a screen where people could look at, make a presentation with a screen on our meeting room. And we had upgraded the chairs because our old chairs were about 50 years old. So we're not getting to use that space right now.
Yeah, unfortunate, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
So have you seen a shift in the way and how much readers are interacting with your content online?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lift in the numbers of people engaging with us online. One thing that was interesting, we also are a registered charity, and we, like everybody, we've been hit hard on advertising and other revenues. So we emailed out and asked for donations to ask for help through our financial challenges. And we had a stunning response. More than 600 people made online donations. The average donation was more than $100. And then a ton of them also sent us words of encouragement during that time. So, I really did feel through, this space that felt very connected and supported by our readers. So that was great. It's helped me, feel motivated in my work.
Oh, that's great. So is Broadview undertaking any special initiatives to help keep readers engaged right now?
Yes. So across Canada, there are already what we call Broadview reading clubs. And these are just, groups of, a dozen people who get together monthly and talk about the magazine, the latest issue, just like a book club. But when COVID happened, we thought it would be a great idea to offer a national online reading club once a month to talk about the latest issue. And so, we did that over Zoom. And the format was, a quick introduction for me, but then we invited 3 of the writers from the recent issue to speak for 5 minutes each about their story. And then we opened the floor to discussion. The whole thing was about an hour, but it was a really great event. And we're going to do it again on Monday, June the 8th. So, we had a lot of positive feedback, and about 70 people joined our Zoom call. And it was, something that I think really brought the community together, and was also very encouraging for the staff to see people so interested in talking to the writers, and for the writers too, to be able to actually talk to the people who had read their story. So it was a really positive event. Yeah,
that's terrific. That's really great. So what's something that you're personally doing to stay positive during this time?
Well, I've started doing online yoga. That helps me to calm down. Just making myself go for walks and bike rides regularly. My husband and I like to, we've decided to make our Saturday nights fancy and special by ordering from a local restaurant once a week. So that's what we do to keep the spirits up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, getting some takeout from like a favorite local spot is always nice, and it helps to break up the, cooking at home every single meal.
Yeah, it feels like something special. So, when the weekends drag a little bit, there's not really much you can do, but it feels like we're, have our own little date night at home or something.
Yeah, that's terrific. Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me and for being here with us on AudioMag.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
Next, we'll hear from Julia Métraux as she chats to us about being a contributing writer. Julia is a journalist whose work has appeared in Narratively, The Tempest, Bust, JSource, Shameless, and Briarpatch. Michael, what can you tell us about this conversation?
What Julia is going to go over is what it's being like at this point, being a freelance writer, contributor. It's not the easiest time to be in one of those positions, and Julia brings some really interesting insight about some of the difficulties, but also some of the things that she's doing to conduct pick up new work, to work with new publications and things like that. So there's definitely hope in these positions, but it certainly, I would say, is probably one of the hardest hit sides in this magazine industry during COVID-19. And now we're here with Julia Métraux. Julia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So Julia, tell me a bit about yourself and your work as a freelance and contributing writer.
Yes, so I have been a freelancer for the past 2 years where, as you mentioned, I've been published at places like Bus Magazine, JSOUR, Shameless, and Briar Patch. But at the same time, I've also done internships, most which have been unpaid, as well as contract work. Right now, I am a contracted editorial assistant at a place called Narratively, and I also am an editorial fellow at a health platform called The Mighty.
So pre-COVID-19, generally when you pitched a piece, what was the process like?
The process was for me is, well, it depended on my relationship with each publication. If I was cold pitching, I would essentially send an email out to an editor introducing myself, saying my pitch, and outlining previous work that I had done. If I had a good relationship with an editor beforehand, it would be more casual. I don't need to introduce myself, and I would just get into the pitch.
And then what's that like now?
Well, right now, the biggest thing is finding out which publications are still accepting freelance pitches, which has gone down a lot, which is really not something I expected or anyone else would have likely expected as well. So that is one more barrier to the process. And also some places which I have written for before are accepting far less pitches than they had prior to COVID-19.
Yeah, that's a really tough position to be in. Has your work shifted to focus more on COVID-19 related pieces?
I do have a fellowship right now at a health publication. So I would say in that case, it absolutely has shifted to covering COVID-19 and essentially the health ramifications that, of course, come with a pandemic. And I find that the only pitches that I have been getting accepted are ones related to COVID-19. So it's a bit frustrating to have ideas and feeling like you can't find a home for them just because of what's happening right now.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine that's a tough position to be in. Have you had to pivot or rework previously commissioned pieces?
I haven't. I'd say I took a little break with pitching right as when everything was happening. And so when I wanted to get back into freelance writing, I was really diving into like a whole new world with COVID-19, but I didn't have to rework any pitches as they were.
So how do you decide what to keep and what to scrap, and diving into that kind of, brave new world, so to speak?
Well, I'd say I'm trying not to scrap any of my ideas. I'm just trying to see what types of stories are more likely to be placed now. Like, for example, I have an autoimmune disease called vasculitis. It causes inflammation in blood vessels. I have regularly written stories about vasculitis. However, there is a COVID-19 angle, which I have been pitching about. There's been a multi-inflammatory disease that has shown in children who get the coronavirus that is mimicking my autoimmune disorder. So I pitched stories related to that just because that's an angle I have that I could bring to a competitive new freelancing world. So that's one thing I've done.
Well, that's good. And so for any of, not good, so to speak, but,
yeah.
I suppose that, it does give you a certain angle. So I know you'd mentioned that you aren't planning to scrap anything. So are you just kind of holding on until, the focus can shift into some of the other pitches you would have originally pitched?
Yeah, one of the best advices that I've gotten from, I guess, more experienced freelancers is to keep a spreadsheet of ideas I have and also link to research that I have done. It's just a really good place to keep all my ideas organized, even if I can't pitch anything right now.
Yeah, no, that's great because then you can kind of hit the ground running when maybe the focus shifts a bit more. Do you foresee big changes in how writers interact with the magazines that they work for?
I think there is a big shift in media in general where people are really feeling disheartened by how freelancers are being treated in terms of not getting commissions. So many more people are becoming freelancers as publications let so many staff writers and editors go. And I just think there's a big disconnect between not necessarily the editors and the freelancers, but freelancers and the people who, I guess, own the publication and make big decisions that affect everyone.
So do you see that interaction that you'll have with magazines will be changing, or is it just that more people will be interacting in the same way you are, as you mentioned, in terms of kind of that reduction in permanent staff?
I'd say yes, but I'm a bit hopeful because it's frustrating right now that I'm hoping that this frustration, which I'm definitely not the only person dealing with, will lead to bigger change. I know in the past few years, a few freelancing unions have popped up around the world meant to support writers. And I'm hoping after this that they gain a lot more traction and are able to support more people. So situations like this don't happen again if we go through another crisis.
Absolutely. So whether it's COVID-19 related or not, what questions do you ask yourself before pitching a piece?
Well, one of the first things I do is I look through websites and see if it would be a good fit there. I see what's already out there, just in general, in terms of the web on my subject, and I try to bring a new angle to a story, if that makes sense. I also ask myself, is this a feasible task for me to do? And also another thing, the last thing I ask myself is if I pitch this piece, particularly if it has to do with leftist politics or leftist social justice groups, if it will open myself up to harassment.
Yeah, that is a very interesting angle to have to consider. And what do you kind of where do you not draw the line, but what kind of do you take into consideration there?
Well, one of the first things I take into consideration is like, will I possibly be in danger if I cover this? For example, I'm totally impressed by the people who do it, but I could never directly cover alt-right groups or similar organizations where journalists' lives really get put in danger when they do cover it. I'm really impressed by the people who do that, but that's just not for me.
So has your writing process drastically changed since lockdowns have been in place?
I think so. I guess one benefit of the lockdown, if I can say that, is that I really have a lot more time to think and come up with ideas because I'm not seeing that many more people other than my family. And so that's helpful. And another thing is that I'm able to block out more time to just write, which I couldn't have been doing with commuting to different places, trying to attend different events and all that.
Oh, great. So what's something that you're personally doing to stay positive during this time?
One thing that I'm doing to stay positive is that I feel lucky to have the work that I'm doing at all. I know a lot of people are not in the same situation, and it's not because they work any less than I do. Some of them work a lot more. So I feel very fortunate for that. And another thing is I just want to become a better writer and get more bylines. And so just trying to meet those goals helps me a lot as well.
Oh, great. And then is there anything kind of during this COVID, not necessarily, I don't know if we're in full lockdown anymore, but anything during COVID specifically that you're doing, getting out for walks or anything like that to stay positive during this time?
Not particularly that I'm doing. I do have a dog who always lifts my spirits just because he's always happy and has no idea what's going on in the world. And he always basically just like, even though I do focus on writing, interrupts me just for a second just to get attention, belly rubs, go anything. And it's just like reminder that it's possible to be positive right now. And yeah, he's just a little glimmer of happiness in my life right now.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And finally, we hear from James Anderson as he discusses advertising in the time of COVID-19. James is the National Sales Director, Canada, for Reader's Digest Media. James manages the sales team as well as selling advertising for his territory. Advertising is one of the hot button subjects right now. This must have been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Kylie, is that advertising. I mean, I do some work as well outside of magazines for a television station. And yeah, ads are a very interesting thing during this time. And I think James is you'll hear him speak about the sharp drop at the beginning of COVID and the steady and constant recovery, and what it's also like being a salesperson in this time when so much is based on face-to-face time and the connections you're building, and what it's like when you can't actually do that right now. So I think a lot of really interesting insights, especially for not just for advertisers or salespeople, for anybody in magazines to hear what that's like, as ads do provide an important source of revenue for magazines. Welcome back, everyone, and we are now here with James Anderson, National Sales Director, Canada for Reader's Digest Media. James, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, James, to get us started, what can you tell us about your position at Reader's Digest and what your day-to-day was like pre-COVID-19?
Oh, right. So yeah, I'm National Sales Director of Canada. So I oversee, we oversee brands such as Reader's Digest Canada, Best Health Magazine, Our Canada, More of Our Canada, Selection, Taste of Home, and The Family Handyman. So we sell majority print and digital advertising. We also sell programmatic advertising, research, and normal day-to-day. I manage a team of 3 sales reps, one in Vancouver, one in Montreal, one in Toronto. And then I'm also out of Toronto as the second Toronto sales rep. So it's a little bit of mix of selling in my own territory as well as managing a team of 3.
So what has the drop in advertising been like? Were you expecting anything like this to happen at the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, I'd say when everything hit in late March, it was a pretty drastic drop-off with new business. I think that was to be expected. Booked sales delayed until teams could really decide on next steps. I think everyone kind of had that moment of, oh boy, we need to, take a pause here and see what our next step should be. But you know what? As time's gone on, it's really starting to approach more of a normal level of activity. And I think advertisers have really done a good job of adjusting quickly and successfully pivoting to new messaging, which has really made it a lot easier for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I definitely feel like there was a big decline all of a sudden when people were kind of unsure of what was going to happen and adjusting to working from home, but then things have started to pick back up as people are kind of realizing that they're going to be here like this for a decent amount of time.
Right.
So what would you say to advertisers hesitant to start spending money on ads again?
I think it really depends on the industry. I think a lot of agencies have been able to quickly pivot to new messaging and continue with great programs. But anyone that's scared to spend right now, I'd say that I understand. I mean, I'd also like to say that being relevant right now is so important. It's a scary time right now for certain advertisers, depending on what industry you're in. But I think if you can put together a solid marketing program, being relevant right now is so important. And I think a good program during times like these can have an amazing lasting effect on the consumer's mind going forward. You've already seen some programs that, have gone viral during this time. So certain advertisers have nailed it out of the park, I think, with some of the programs they've had, and some might have tried to take the easy route when things started to go south in late March. But I think for the most part, it's been amazing to see how quickly these teams have been able to kind of pause what they had planned for 2020 and pivot to an amazing program that is not only relevant, but helps out the consumer right now as well.
Absolutely. So you'd mentioned that ad sales are starting to recover. What are you seeing there, and what kind of is that trend?
Yeah, I think at the beginning, everyone was simply just scared and didn't know what to do. So I think the easiest thing to do was just, all right, let's pull everything for now, regroup, and decide on next steps. I think now that everyone's had time to pause and kind of realize, okay, we can still put a solid program together right now. I think as weeks go by, agencies seem to be getting more and more comfortable with the situation, and they keep finding new ways to get their clients' messaging out to market with trusted sources like some of our brands. I think right now, more than ever, it's really important to make sure that you're spending in the right places. I've seen certain advertisers kind of pull back a little bit in the programmatic space because they have less control, but then work with a print brand that, they have more control and they have more trustability and credibility, right? Working with a brand like Reader's Digest, which has been around for over 70 years, that's a safe place to keep your messaging, and it's a safe magazine that's not going to be covering things that might be controversial during a time like this. So I think that's super important right now.
Absolutely. Have you noticed a shift in the content that advertisers are submitting?
Yeah, I think certainly there has been a bit of a shift, but we're in a different situation here at RD Media, that we represent a lot of amazing brands in the health and wellness market, like Best Health Magazine. So our clients have been able to hold strong with a lot of their offers for the most part, just because they're still relevant during this time. We work with a lot of health and wellness brands that, at this point in time, this is a great time for them to be in market. We have, however, seen some clients have a tough time being able to get creative ready in time, just because of the effect that COVID-19 has had on their business processes. But I think it's really important, and our team really put a lot of focus on this when everything went down, that we need to adjust our offerings to help our clients out. If a client needs help with creative, we make sure we have the resources available to help them out. I think being a good partner right now is more important than ever.
That's a very good point, and that's very interesting that RD Media provides that option, should need be. So what planning and strategy exercises have changed since COVID-19?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the sales outreach approach has really certainly changed. I think as salespeople, we need to understand that these times are tough, and we need to be there for our partners. We can't be, trying to take advantage of the situation. That's the number one thing that our team agreed on when everything went down, that we wouldn't. This isn't business as usual. This is a very interesting time. We need to do whatever we can to keep our clients happy and make sure that they know that we're there for them. So we've adjusted our strategy and want to just ensure that our clients know we're a helping hand, and to make sure that they understand we're certainly not reps trying to take advantage of the situation. And I've been fortunate enough, our team's been incredible, and we just simply want to be amazing partners wherever we can. And the way that we communicate with clients is different. It's, there's no face-to-face meetings anymore. There's no meeting for a coffee. There's no, going into the agencies and dropping off some stuff. So trying to host virtual lunch and learns, or doing virtual exercise classes, or what have you, has really been the new way of business. And that's something that we're trying to adjust to.
So yeah, what are some of those things that you have changed, or that again, as you said, there's no in-person meeting. So what are you doing to shift that?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because having a Zoom meeting with an agency of 40 people is tough. It's tough. You can't really read the room in most situations. So as a salesperson, it's, we're constantly trying to figure out new ways to keep them engaged. I know some of our colleagues in the US have started doing some virtual exercise classes, which has been amazing. So they've actually been hosting like a, virtual yoga session that they invite the agency contacts to. So doing stuff like that, I think, is going to become the new normal. I think it's going to be a long time before, we can be going in and out of different offices. So this could be the new normal. So I think it's really up to sales teams to really figure out, how do we keep our agencies engaged, and how do we stay in touch without it's seeming like you're trying to take advantage of something.
A good point. So for you personally, how has managing your sales team changed since the beginning of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super fortunate enough to have such an amazing team. It's honestly been a very smooth process, to be honest with you. I think having staff that understand the situation and can pivot to the new normal per se is so important right now. Our adjustment to work from home certainly took some time to get used to, but I think it's been great so far. And honestly, I can't thank my team enough for adjusting to this new way of doing things so quickly, because I know it's certainly not easy, and especially as salespeople, it's definitely out of the norm to just be sitting in one spot all day. We thrive off being busy and, having 4 different places to go during the day to meet with people and talk with people. And I think adjusting to this work from home is certainly harder for some people over others, but for salespeople especially, I think it's a huge adjustment. But I've been fortunate enough that we have 3 amazing sales reps that I get to work with on an everyday basis that really have strived through this.
Oh, that's great. So, are you missing that personal interaction? Even though, Zoom is great or virtual meetings are great, but are you missing that personal interaction?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of people say, I think in the first couple of weeks of work from home, everyone's like, oh, this is a nice little change, not having to commute into work. And, some people looked at it maybe as a little bit of a, vacation or time off. But the longer this goes, you really realize how important it is to be in that office atmosphere and being able to, sit with your colleagues and brainstorm, and even just seeing your colleagues every morning. Like, it's going from seeing those people every day to not seeing them at all. It's wild. Like, we've tried to do, virtual happy hours every couple of weeks just to kind of stay in touch. And it's crazy to see, how that, 45-minute call with them can change your entire mood. So
absolutely.
I'm certainly missing that right now.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to other sales departments during this pandemic? Maybe lessons that you've learned through your department?
Sure. I'd say stay positive. As salespeople, we thrive off success. But during this time, I think we need to realize that making a sale doesn't equal success. A lot of times we're measured off of numbers. Our success is measured off of sales. But I think right now, if you're able to help out a client with, sending research metrics that make their lives easier, or help an agency with some insights that might help their clients out, that's success to me right now.
Great. Are you doing anything differently to try and draw advertisers back in or draw new advertisers to the magazine at this time?
Yeah, I think there's certainly some things that we're doing, but I think we're also fortunate enough that we work for such amazing brands that really do speak for themselves. Like, as we talked about, a brand like RD, it's been around for over 70 years and is known as a trusted source for great content. So I think during this time, people are looking for those trusted sources. And that alone makes all of our lives a lot easier. And our partners truly see the value every time they put their trust in us. So I think we've been fortunate enough that we're in a position that we kind of have a good mix of brands that we have to offer, and brands that are really relevant right now. We've been deemed essential because there's going to be COVID content and health and wellness content. So we're in a great position where advertisers are still able to work with us, and our business has been relatively unaffected to this time.
Well, that's good news. So what's something that you're personally doing to stay positive during this time?
Well, I've been pretty busy. I bought a house right before COVID-19 happened.
Oh, wow.
So I was fortunate enough to have to go through an entire move right in the middle of all of this. We recently moved north of the city into our first home. So that's been keeping us really busy. So, whether it's working on the new deck out back or new gardens or cooking a new recipe in our new kitchen with my fiance, that's really, really helped us stay positive and active during these times. And it's been nice because it's given us the opportunity to settle into our new home and enjoy a lot of more quality time together than we wouldn't have otherwise.
Absolutely, yeah. And to have something new like that certainly does kind of keep the spirits up, although I can only imagine finding a moving truck in the heat of it must have been difficult.
Yes, shout out to U-Haul. Thank you very much for staying open during this time. I was getting a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure how that was going to work, but it was fortunate enough to get a truck, and had a couple buddies that were willing to help me out for an hour. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah, glad that that's done though.
Anything else that you'd like to add about kind of advertising and the outlook in magazines at this point?
I think at this point, just everyone needs to stay positive. I know this time isn't easy, and we're all feeling the effects. But I think people need to really realize that it's easy to just get stuck in a routine right now. But if you have your vacation time, take it. If you need a mental health day, take it. If you want to, just go for a road trip with your spouse for the day, do it. During these times that we can get stuck with, I'll just work from home. But if you need a break, take it, because it's super important to keep yourself healthy right now.
All right. Well, thanks so much, James. That's very useful information, and it's great to hear that things are going well at Reader's Digest, and finding new ways to connect with clients and with your team. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, and thank you again to Jocelyn Bell, Julia Métraux, and James Anderson for joining us today. Be sure to check out Part 1 to hear from Melissa Summerfield, Jesse Johnson, and Michelle Gerard about their experiences during COVID-19. Thanks again, Michael. It's always nice to catch up.
Yeah, no, this is great. I wish we could be together in person, as we usually do when we record AudioMag. But you know what? This is the next best thing.
Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review AudioMag on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Magazines Canada on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram @MagsCanada, and on LinkedIn as Magazines Canada for more magazine news and resources. AudioMag is a Magazines Canada podcast produced by Messenger Bag Media. We recognize the funding of the Canadian Department of Heritage through the Canada Periodical Fund.